Hi, my name is Liam. I want to talk about violations to constitutional rights happening in my state, specifically at this time to myself. I live in Wilmington, Delaware, which is located in Newcastle County, Delaware, the topmost county in the state, which is very liberal and left-leaning predominantly, whereas the lower two counties, Kent and Sussex, are pretty much conservative. This city, Wilmington, is one of the most violent in the country. So much so that it earned the nickname Murder Town from Newsweek magazine. We are at 100 shootings this year, possibly one or two over, and there are many more that go unreported. Of these shootings, many have related in fatalities, some have resulted in serious injury or children being shot or killed. This is a constant reality that spans every neighborhood in the city, where the neighborhoods are divided up and run by various gangs and criminal elements, each working different kinds of cons or drug-related activity or any kind of organized crime you can imagine. There is nowhere that's safe. My family and almost every neighbor on my street have been the victims of crimes again and again and again and again. Specifically for my family, we've had the house broken into 5 times. We've been physically beaten. Anything you can imagine. People trying to break in, people coming on the porch, accosted on the street, threatened, vandalism, lots of vandalism, including in the Christmas of 2015, it was about the week before Christmas, and I had been late at school. I'm a college student, and so my mother and I were driving home, and someone had pulled in the middle of the street. He came to the car windows and began pounding on them, stating he had a gun and he would shoot us. I got out of the car and got in a fight with him, hoping that if he did have a gun, he wouldn't be able to reach it. We were stuck there in the car. There was nowhere to go. And so it ended up in a fight where my mother and I were both physically beaten. He ended up not having a gun, or at least if he did, he didn't pull it, but he did demonstrate that he had a knife. We were able to get back in the car, and he decided to leave, and so fortunately we didn't get hurt worse. But that was the last straw for us. We decided we had to buy a gun for home and self-defense. We had been researching the subject, but hadn't really made up our minds. We had really started to research it heavily the previous summer, when our neighbors across the street, at around 5 in the morning, I believe, had 5 or 6 masked people with guns break in, bound and gagged them, and trashed their house. And the reason that I found out was the police had come to my house to look at the surveillance footage to see if anything could be seen, as we do have surveillance cameras around the property. So all of these things, year in and year out, and we decided that we had to get serious about self-defense. I had non-lethal self-defense items, but that just wasn't enough when there's this many people that want to kill each other, and it's so dangerous. So we decided to buy a gun. So we went to the gun store, we bought one, we tried to familiarize ourselves with all the rules as best as we could, and what we seemed to find was that Delaware is an open carry state, but it's a may issue concealed carry permit state. And so whenever we carried the gun out of the house, we just open carried it, or had to keep it in the car with the bullets separate from the gun, in different compartments or in different parts of the car, or something along those lines. So last August, I was walking across the street while open carrying, and I was stopped by a group of people, 2 people specifically, who said they were police. This turned out not to be the case later. As the conversation progressed, they said they were with something called Project Safe Streets, which is designed to go after probationers and parolees to make sure, to my understanding, they are keeping their curfews or not on drugs or not reverting back to whatever put them in jail or probation or whatever it may be. I am not on probation and parole, and I was not at the time. So immediately they come over and seize or arrest me and search, and as they're searching, they're talking and asking me questions. Specifically, the person that I was talking to was named Tom Looney, and he was a probation employee or person from the state probation office. And he said that he remembered seeing me at a festival in the city the previous summer, open carrying weapons. He said that he remembered having seen a gun At the time, we didn't own a gun. I was open carrying non-lethal weapons. But regardless, he said that that was what drew his attention, and that's why he stopped to talk to me, because he believed that I would be carrying weapons, because he had seen me carrying weapons in the past, and didn't really say anything about having noticed if I was open carrying or carrying at all. He just said that he recognized my face. And so I was charged with being a person prohibited with weapons and concealed carry without a permit for the gun and two pocket knives that I had. None of this made any sense to me, but when I had a public defender take it over and look at the case, it was determined that I was not a person prohibited, that was some kind of an error in their system, but that as far as the charges for the knives, it was because the state had decided that although almost any size knife is legal to buy at various stores around here, Cabela's, Dick's, Walmart, that the state had decided that once a knife was over 3 inches, it was a deadly weapon, and you would need a permit for that, as well as for concealed carrying a gun. You would need a permit to carry these knives in your pocket or even on your belt if it wasn't obviously apparent that you were carrying it. And so, as he started to go through these facts, the prosecutor and the public defender came to the determination that this should be a mitigation case, which meant that all proceedings for trial were put on hold, and for the next 7 or 8 months, it was in mitigation, which meant that the goal was supposed to be for some kind of a diversion program or dropping all charges, and in the meantime, to try and meet that goal, I had to meet with the prosecutor to explain why I had the weapons, about background as far as my safety, my concerns, what kind of person am I, so he could get to know me, character references, school transcripts, psychiatric evaluations or workups, a whole bunch of things like that. And so at that meeting, I also discussed with him that I didn't know there was such a law as that when you go to the store you see different knives. These particular knives were by Kershaw. One was 4.4 inches and the other one was 3.5 inches. So both very slightly over the limit that the state had said, but as a technical thing, he charged for it because it was over the limit. And so I told him and said, if I knew that, or if somebody had told me that, but how was I to know that? That when you go to the store, you see these knives, there are no disclaimers like you see with things like alcohol or cigarettes, where it has things that say, warning, don't sell to minors, or warning, you need an ID to purchase, or any other kind of warning. You just buy these and that's it. There's no issue whatsoever. And so it's definitely a misunderstanding type case, and that I outlined all the reasons why we fear for our safety, and that I was trying to do everything right, and that we just don't feel safe. And the thing is that in this city, the police and the government are pretty much worthless as far as trying to fix anything. The police, many of them are very apathetic when dealing with and approaching problems in this city. In many cases, people call and they don't come out, especially if it's a dangerous call. Oftentimes what you see involving a shooting is either the police will come out an hour to 2 hours later, or they'll come out in force and stay concentrated to one specific area and not fan out and look for any kind of people involved who could be trying to escape the area. They'll concentrate on the immediate city block that had happened. In addition to this, many people around here will tell you that even if it was a loved one or a neighbor or a relative or a friend who was shot, that the police treat them as if they are a suspect, and so they don't like talking to them. But in addition to all this, due to the heavy criminal presence in this city, most people are afraid because of sayings like snitches get stitches that are rampant in every part of the city. So this is just the kind of environment that there is, where if you don't see to your own security, you're probably not going to get help from the police, from your neighbors, from the city council, from anyone. You're on your own. And as a matter of fact, right a few nights ago, there was a horrible shooting directly behind my house, where I, through an open window upstairs, heard the shooting and then the screams of pain and fear from the people who were there. And this was involving a house that I had already went to Philip Casal, the prosecutor, while this case was going on, because I had on my home security cameras a man who was being chased, who was shot immediately around the corner, and the people who were chasing him. and these people are renting a house behind me where they have set up some kind of a major drug operation that I've been seeing for weeks now, with cars coming and going and people going in and out of the house. And this is nothing new. You see this anywhere in the city. Philip Casale never had me come in to give a statement. I'm not even sure he looked at the video. He certainly didn't know anything about it, because after that man was shot, the operation continued. I continued to see and hear it. And now, a few nights ago, 2 more people were shot and seriously wounded. And so this is just the reality here. And so the direction that they've taken with this case was that after months and months of this supposed mitigation, on May 1st, the day of a case review, the prosecutor called the public defender and told him that the only thing he would offer is a felony plea. And this was despite all the mitigation he took into account, including the fact that I am diagnosed with autism, the fact that I live in this horrible neighborhood, the fact that I'm just trying to protect myself and my family as best as I can, the fact that I have a 3.89 GPA in college, I'm a third-year college student, all the positive references, the positive psychiatric evaluations, every bit of things that he asked for and said were so important for him to make a good decision, or a lenient, or whatever you want to call it, decision. And despite all that, he still said that I should plead to a felony, which also they had classified concealed carrying of a gun without a permit a violent felony. He didn't want to hear that I hadn't been concealing it, even though I walked through all this with him. He didn't want to take into account why I had a variety of weapons. He just insisted that it was staggering to him, despite the fact that if you only carry a gun, that's what you're going to use. If you carry other things, then you're not going to shoot somebody. And I'd explained to him that I even had hollow point bullets, so that if I did have to shoot somebody in self-defense, there was almost no chance it would hurt any innocent bystanders. Every single bit of it made sense. I brought in materials to prove it to him, proof of trainings and things that I had attended, and he didn't want to do it. So the attorney said that if anything, it was probably just political, because this county, and by extension this state, or this part of the state, is liberal and anti-gun, and so he just decided, or someone over him decided, that every gun case has to go to trial and they want a felony, despite the fact that in addition to making it so I couldn't defend myself, it would ruin my life, for every reason that a felony would ruin your life, besides not being able to defend yourself, specifically with areas of employment. And so after this happened, immediately after months and months of stagnation, we're rushed to go to trial, and the attorney, the public defender, also was leaving the office to go into private practice. So he advised that I should hire private counsel, which I had to scramble and go do. And he had also warned that, in his opinion, every motion to suppress his office had tried, specifically dealing with guns, but many even that didn't involve guns, had been rubber stamped by the judges, despite the constitutional validity of it. Why, he didn't know. I figured it must be because he was working for the public defender's office, and they both work for the state. However, the private attorney felt similar, and so we did have a motion to suppress, and it was denied. And it was apparent at the hearing, and when I talked to him, that my rights were violated, as far as immediately being seized without probable cause, the fact that the cop was lying, because what had happened was, the way that when they were in the car, when they're saying all this happened, they had 2 people in the front. The driver was Thomas Looney, the one who said he remembered me, and next to him was someone named Collins, who was also from probation. In the back seat was a man named Vasquez, who said that he was with the Wilmington police. However, he was with Safe Street, so he was not with the police. He was in this probation and parole unit. And he was the only one who showed up to testify at the suppression, and claimed that from his vantage in the back seat, he could see 10 yards away, to see through my hand, which I measured, and the attorney had measured, is 5 inches, to see the handle of the gun, which is 4 inches. It was a Glock 26, and he could see at 10 yards away that it was concealed carry and not that I was adjusting it. And this made absolutely no sense. Initially, he actually stated that he recalled it being a Smith & Wesson and a large gun, and my attorney said it was in fact a Glock 26 with a 4-inch handle. And even with all these facts in account, the judge still denied the motion to suppress. So now we're supposed to go to trial, which the attorney doesn't feel good about either. and the whole thing is just so unfair and just being rushed through. So there's no regard for my Second Amendment rights or for my Fourth Amendment rights, and essentially, when you boil it all down to what's really going on here, I'm being punished because they feel that I flagrantly broke the rules without buying a permit for a constitutional right that I'm guaranteed. Don't want to hear that I was even attempting to try and follow those rules despite the fact that they are unconstitutional to begin with. And so they want to push ahead with the trial anyway, currently scheduled for Tuesday the 20th of June of this month, and actually in just a few days, not taking into account any of the mitigating factors, even especially the fact that I am diagnosed with autism, and that is something that I struggle with and have struggled with my entire life, and I had to work so hard on the anxiety, the exacerbated fears, impulsivity, and everything that goes with that I have to struggle with. They don't even want to hear about, and state that that's irrelevant, not a defense, not something that should come up. And so my attorney did tell me that the only way to work in autism as a defense, or for mens rea, would be if the jury found me not guilty by reason of insanity, as that was the only option left to them by the existing state laws, which would result in me, although having no conviction, being remanded to the state psychiatric hospital because they would basically treat it as criminally insane or otherwise insane and had no other kind of condition or option for people who have autism or any other kind of factor such as OCD or PTSD. It would all be treated under the same umbrella. And it's pretty clear that the gangs are the ones who run this city, and you hear about it all the time with all sorts of horrible stories. For instance, that there was an instance with some elderly ladies over in the west part of the city where they had installed floodlights on their porch, and the gangs that were operating in that area didn't want any more light shed on their criminal activities at night, and so they began to relentlessly vandalize the women's property until they removed the floodlights. And again, they had no recourse and no help from the police or any kind of neighborhood watch initiative or anything. Just consistently, those are the kind of things that happen. The gangs run the streets, and if you don't have any way to defend yourself, then they just relentlessly target you until you give in to their demands, and they feel like you're no longer a threat to them. But if you feel you are a threat to them, then you may be shot at, intimidated, or otherwise punished until they feel you're complying. And so with all these facts taken into account, no one wants to buy into this neighborhood or into this city, and so we can't sell our house, and so we also can't afford to just pick up and leave, so we're stuck here. And so that's why I've been working very hard in school as a computer science major to be able to get a good job, to be able to help my family afford to pick up and start somewhere fresh. And that's another element of my life that this court case is affecting and hurting, and a felony conviction would guarantee that I wouldn't be able to get employment in my field or be able to keep going with school or any other positive thing that I'm trying to do. And so it was my goal to spread awareness with what's going on here. And I want to thank everyone for listening, and please help and get involved by sharing this, by calling the governor, the mayor of the city of Wilmington, the attorney general, specifically with what's going on with the prosecutor Philip Casal. Please just make your voice heard and help with this. And I want to thank everyone again for listening and for helping in any way in advance, and just thank you. They were in the car, there was nowhere to go, and so it ended up in a fight where my mother and I were both physically beaten. He ended up not having a gun, or at least if he did, he didn't pull it, but he did demonstrate that he had a knife. We were able to get back in the car, and he decided to leave, and so fortunately we didn't get hurt worse. But that was the last straw for us. We decided we had to buy a gun for home and self-defense. We had been researching the subject, but hadn't really made up our minds. We had really started to research it heavily the previous summer when our neighbors across the street at around 5 in the morning, I believe, had 5 or 6 masked people with guns break in, bound and gagged them. Hi, my name is Liam. I want to talk about violations to constitutional rights happening in my state, specifically at this time to myself. I live in Wilmington, Delaware, which is located in Newcastle County, Delaware, the topmost county in the state, which is very liberal and left-leaning predominantly, whereas the lower 2 counties, Kent and Sussex, are pretty much conservative. This city, Wilmington, is one of the most violent in the country. So much so that it earned the nickname Murder Town from Newsweek magazine. We are at 100 shootings this year, possibly 1 or 2 over, and there are many more that go unreported. Of these shootings, many have related in fatalities, some have resulted in serious injury or children being shot or killed. This is a constant reality that spans every neighborhood in the city, where the neighborhoods are divided up and run by various gangs and criminal elements, each working different kinds of cons or drug-related activity or any kind of organized crime you can imagine. There is nowhere that's safe. My family and almost every neighbor on my street have been the victims of crimes again and again and again and again. Specifically for my family, we've had the house broken into 5 times. We've been physically beaten. Anything you can imagine. People trying to break in, people coming on the porch, accosted on the street, threatened, vandalism, lots of vandalism, including in the Christmas of 2015. It was about the week before Christmas, and I had been late at school. I'm a college student, and so my mother and I were driving home, and someone had pulled in the middle of the street. He came to the car windows and began pounding on them, stating he had a gun and he would shoot us. I got out of the car and got in a fight with him, hoping that if he did have a gun, he wouldn't be able to reach it. We were stuck them and trashed their house. And the reason that I found out was the police had come to my house to look at the surveillance footage to see if anything could be seen, as we do have surveillance cameras around the property. So all of these things, year in and year out, and we decided that we had to get serious about self-defense. I had non-lethal self-defense items, but that just wasn't enough when there's this many people that want to kill each other, and it's so dangerous. So we decided to buy a gun. So we went to the gun store, we bought one, we tried to familiarize ourselves with all the rules as best as we could, and what we seemed